All right, we are recording. Welcome to the IAG Thursday thing. This thing we do every Thursday where we all kind of hang out, talk about what's going on in the world, what isn't going on in the world, and sometimes we have a guest. And this week we do have a guest, which is pretty awesome because he's going to talk about something I am pretty terrible at. We brought on Drew Hackett from Penguin Garage. A autocross nut job and a expert in all things goofy AN fittings. Drew, how you doing, bud?
Doing well.
Sweet. So, let's talk real quick. Last week was your biggest event of the year, was it not?
Yeah. To say the least.
So, what happened last week? Give us a quick rundown, and we'll go from there.
All right. So every year around the Labor Day week is SCCA Solo Nationals, where everybody who can get in comes to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they get 2 days of racing, 3 runs each day. So you get a total of 6 runs, and your 2 fastest times from each course is how you did for the whole year, essentially. There was 1,278 drivers at this event.
1,200 people there competing.
Yeah.
So how do you get into Solo Nationals? One doesn't simply just say, I'm bored, I'm going to Solo Nationals this week. I'm assuming that you have to qualify for it, do you not?
No.
No.
Correct. So the big show, or whatever they want to call it, anybody can register for. And the intention from that is they want people to experience it before they're super crazy good, because there is so many of that 1,278 people. There's not that many trophies. So there's a lot more people that are slower than the top pointy end, and you still really enjoy it, even if you're not at the pointy end of the sport. So there isn't a requirement for they call it the tour. Now, the Sunday and Monday before Solo Nationals, they do the Pro Solo of the final Pro Solo of the year. And that one you do need to qualify for, because it's
what is the difference between Pro Solo? Is that when they do a mirrored course?
They do the mirrored course with a drag start with the lights, and they clock your 60 foot, and so you do like the left side first, and then you immediately go to the right side. So right after it against the same person, and then your times are added together. And they actually do like a shootout at the end where like it's heads up, where if you hit a cone on your run during your heads up, you're just out, and you end up with the final winner. It's super wild, but it's a little more intense. And since it goes so much quicker, you kind of need the experience of Pro Solo to be at the big show for that. So you have to have qualified for the Pro Solo.
Okay, so pardon my so what you were competing in was solo. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially the biggest event of the year that of people who normally are in like school parking lots and things like that, dodging cones in a parking lot, which are usually ran by local SCCA clubs. This is ran by the national SCCA, I'm assuming, it's on a national level. This is the big one, correct?
Right. So the big SCCA as a whole, their main group runs this event. And it's at Lincoln Air Park, which, if anyone's bored and they're staring at Google Maps, you can Google Lincoln Air Park and find the course. It is absolutely massive. And they run 2 courses on this it's huge. They basically park B-52s and fighter jets and stuff on here when it's not in use. It's just this massive concrete that is some of the best concrete in the country in terms of grip, in terms of how it performs. People drive all the way from Oregon and South Florida to come to this event simply because of the surface.
And we're talking Lincoln, Nebraska. So it is. Nebraska already is kind of flat in its own, and it is fairly remote. So this is out there, but it is fairly center of the country.
Correct. And they've done They kind of try to do that for the big event. They used to do Kansas.
Yeah.
And like that was a mess because it was like super sandy or dusty for some reason. And they lost
Kansas?
that site.
Well, isn't SCCA based out of Kansas? I think they're actually right near Heartland Motorsports Park.
That's where it used to be.
Yeah.
They used to run nationals there, but they got an opportunity to do Lincoln. And if anyone has done the search for it yet, you'll understand why. It's such a nice site. And one of the coolest things about it is simply the amount of people that are there. So when you show up and you pull in with your trailer or just driving your car or with an RV, and you go to paddock, like you have a parking spot that you've been designated either by the group that you run with or the region you run with, or you've assigned one yourself. And they're like massively wide. There's like 30 or 40 spots per row. And they went all the way back to row, I think 37 this year, 38.
Oh damn!
So like it's like a 2-mile walk from the back row all the way to where the actual courses are, and it's just packed with people. It's a site in of itself. I'll share a link if I can find it.
So let's talk a little bit about what you do. Okay, yeah. So first off, your day job is you're the owner of Penguin Garage, and you basically are you're a shop and kind of a race prep kind of place, is my understanding, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We also we source parts for anything and everything.
Yes.
What you need, we can get. But our main focus is trying to help people get ready for races.
Well, you have saved my ass on multiple occasions.
I like your phone calls. I need this.
I need the finger to connect to the humjigger dealy with the little. It's got an O-ring and it's round and it's about this big, and somehow the right fitting shows up. It literally, the phone calls are about like that. So it's pretty. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can now. I lost you for a minute there.
Oh, maybe you hit some bad internet. Anyway, yeah. Usually the right fitting shows up. You've saved my butt on multiple occasions, especially when it's a very odd fitting. I know Dylan, who's in the chat, appreciates the living hell out of you. Because we just need some really goofy stuff for Boogie. And, if anybody else is doing, Drew's background is in Subarus, but if you need weird AN fittings, you're going to have a hard time finding a better person to get them from than Drew.
I appreciate that.
Yep. It's super awesome. But so you do, now let's talk about what you actually race. So you have a GD, I'm 05 STI, I think is what year it is?
Yeah.
Okay, and you run in what's called street modified within in the SCCA, like the solo rule set. And what's really funny is you and I both run in a class called street modified, but yours is pretty damn different than mine. So give me a rundown of like, what is a street modified car in solo? Like what is the kind of concept of your car?
So street modified in short is Hoosier A7s. You're open on any suspension as long as it doesn't change mounting points. Engines are completely open. You can do engine swaps to V8s or rotaries or keep the EJ, whatever you want. There's front splitter allowances, specific sizes and stuff. Wings are pretty open. You got to have a certain step back, and it can't be more than 6 inches above, and there's a certain square inch you can do, but it's a big wing. Most people in the class run 315s or bigger in terms of tires. And
is there any rules about tire width?
No.
Okay.
Whatever Hoosier makes, we can.
Can
run.
Okay. I'm just gonna smack you with a bunch of questions here real quick because I just kind of want to understand. As far as like suspension goes, are you allowed 2, 3, 4-way, whatever, just as long as it's suspension mounting points, that's cool. And I'm assuming they consider a suspension mounting point like a drop knuckle would change that because they consider the inner and the outer a suspension mounting point.
Nope, it's only at the chassis.
Oh, well, hell, that opens up all sorts of fun shit, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, we got billet knuckles, we got custom.
What about a roll center adjustment kit?
So roll center's fine because...
Or not roll center, a anti-lift kit.
So anti-lift kit changes the housing, which mounts to the chassis, which is the point. But you can do... So this is where SCCA gets fun. For a GD specifically, the Forester SG is on the same line as the GD for a different class, which means for street modified, anything on a Forester is fine on the STI. They have a different factory like rear control arm mount, which actually lowers it a little bit. So it gives it kind of the anti-lift kit properties.
Sure.
And we can run those legally on the GD because it's a factory part that's on the same line. But if I were to take like a white line piece, I would get bumped out of street mod.
So they do consider that a mounting point then. So these are just small things that like the SCCA's always been what they consider a mounting point. And, you know, like things like that have always been kind of strange, at least to me from my background. And what's really funny is when you have somebody coming from SCCA and they look at like the Wild West that's going on over in like Grid Life or GTA or something like that. They're like, I can't believe all this shit's allowed. Like, you guys are nuts.
Well, but the Grid Life kind of mentality, not that it's bad by any means, is it's just bleeding into the SCCA. There's a new class called XA, which is extreme sport all-wheel drive, essentially, or fat, I guess, because there's a higher min weight. It's entirely open, unless you have all you need is a quote-unquote finished interior, and you have a minimum weight of 3180 with driver and 200 treadwear tire. That's basically the only limitation.
It. And then throw down, huh?
Street Mod this year only had 11 drivers.
Really? So
like 18, 20. XA had 35.
Okay, so that mentality. So the SCCA is starting to go, okay, maybe our rule book is a little convoluted. One of the reasons that I veered towards Time Attack when I wanted to start doing more competition-oriented stuff is the rule book was way simpler. And also the approach to the rule book is easier. And the SCCA, the rule book kind of is, if it's not in the rule book, it's not legal. And then with Grid Life, it's the total opposite. If it's not in the rule book, if there's not a rule specifically against it, consider it legal.
Yeah, the SCCA goes along the lines of we list what you can do.
Yes,
and if it's
versus
not there,
what you can't do.
Allowed. Yeah, and that has its merit in what the
SCCA by all means
does.
It's ridiculous how you can have so many different cars show up and you know the split on an autocross course will be like within a few tenths. You know, it's unreal.
Right. And so just to touch on, I did a little searching for the counts on the event. There were 72 Subarus out of the 1,200 something.
That's what I was going to get at.
And the spread is wild. So mostly it's in street classes. So there was 20 BRZs or 19 BRZs and 1 WRX in D Street, which is a completely stock class to an extent. You can do shocks, 1 sway bar, and wheels and tires, as long as they're the same width as factory, within like 7 millimeter offset. Yeah. But tire width is unrestricted. So you can run as big a tire, small tire as you want. People tend to find the happy medium for the stock 8-inch or 8.5-inch wide wheels.
So what we're controlling tire width with is your OEM wheel itself.
Wheel width, yeah.
Yeah.
And the new 200 treadwear does not like to be pinched.
No. Not at all. It's actually you see what I'm doing since they actually limit the width. I'm running and this would be polar opposite for what you'd see on some of these SCCA cars. I'm running a 10.5-inch wheel with a 255. On the SCCA cars, you'll see guys trying to run an 8.5-inch wheel with a 255.
Right, or smaller.
Yeah, those just to try to cram more tire in there. Which, look, if you can find time, it's not wrong.
Exactly, and it's kind of the rule set limitation kind of game. Like it's hard to compare multiple disciplines when one of them has literally a restrictor on the turbo. It's like, you're not going to get more than 300 horsepower. But it's just super cool for autocross purposes, like because the street classes they have S, SS, AS, and then all the way to HS, and it's stacked full of people because it's easy to get into.
Yep.
I mean, you could essentially buy a car that's already been built by somebody else, or you just go get a new one and do like a couple $1,000s worth of crap to it, and now you're competitive.
Well, that's kind of the nice thing about the SCCA too is, and again, talking about Time Attack because it's its own weird chasm, and I know there's a lot of comparison going on, but I'm fairly insulated in street mod from some pro drivers showing up in a mildly prepped car and mopping the floor with me. But if you can drive and before you go purchase a car, you maybe go look at where are these cars showing up within a particular autocross class, and if you wanted to get competitive really quick, you could buy a very competitive car really fast, and maybe go to nationals and win something if you can actually drive. What would be holding you back is yourself, not your car.
And that's kind of the wild part too about nationals is the guys that are really, really good show up.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it's nationals.
To give you an idea of time, and this is just before we get too in the weeds.
Yeah.
I was driving my Corolla because my Subaru's broken.
Okay.
I ran a 121, which is not a terrible time for both days. There was a bone stock 2000 Miata that ran 3 seconds faster than me. Like, holy crap. Like, this guy would have placed really well against a bunch of 400 horsepower Subarus. And it's not because the course is designed for a Miata. It definitely wasn't. It's just there's some guys that have been driving bone stock Miatas for longer than we've been alive. And it's like, how it's just wild to watch.
They can extract speed. There is autocross. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't, say you're a good driver on a road course or a good driver in autocross that it doesn't transition over. But I will say there is a particular skill set with autocross that you have to have a particular mentality to not only pick the track up really fast, but or the particular course really fast, but you have to be able to adapt in like a split freaking second. One of the other things I thought was very cool too, and this is kind of also very interesting to autocross. If you want to be competitive, especially on the national level, it's very rare that you're going to see somebody just driving their own car and that's it. What you tend to see is two people driving the same car because you're trying to keep heat in the tires and keep the car warmed up and ready to go. So it's basically kind of hot lapping. Am I wrong in saying that?
No. So I wouldn't say hot lapping, but at nationals it's not. So like at a local, if you have 100 people and if you have 100 people get split into 2 or 3 heats, you have between 30 and 50 people per heat. That means you have to wait 50 cars before you run again. If you have 2 drivers, you only have to wait 25 cars before your car moves again. So you can maintain some heat in the tires. At nationals, the run groups are like 70 cars. So if you don't have a 2-driver car, you're waiting 60, 70 cars before it's your turn again. So if you have a second driver, it cuts that time a lot.
Are you allowed to do like 3 or 4 driver cars?
Not in the same heat, no. It's restricted to 2. And there's ways, like there's rules about tire warming. Like you can't do a burnout. Like you can't have electric tire warmers. You can have passive warmers. So if you have tire blankets, like you can put tire blankets over the top of the tires.
But they can't be. But they can't be like a heated element.
Correct. And if it wraps all the way around the car, which some people do, the car has to be off when it's wrapped around.
So you can't use like engine heat to like heat your tires. That's funny.
But now the funny thing is the new 200 treadwear tires, they overheat. So people are dousing these things between runs, especially if they have two drivers.
Oh,
so
I'm sure, especially those like
driver,
an AO52 or something like that. Those things might as well be. They're RComps. They're like OG RComps. They're not 200 treadwear tires. They're more like 70 to 80 treadwear tires with 200 stamped on the side. So yeah. And how are they as far as speed compared to like you running like a Hoosier A7 on your car?
So Street Mod, to give you an idea, their fastest driver in Street Mod ran a 110. Which was flying. He ran a 110, and then STU, which is a modified car class without bigger turbo, stock size turbo, they ran a 114. And then XA, who is, they can do whatever they want.
That's whatever they want, but with a street tire.
With a street tire, they ran a 113. So it's a 1.5 second gain going to Hoosiers. Still, even though the A7 is like 20 years old at this point.
That's interesting. But we are talking an A7, not an R7. So, like what they ended up finding out on like the GLTC guys, the GLTC guys ran into they found out that a 200 treadwear tire would come on fast. And then end up putting a bunch of space on before the R7s get enough heat into them to then be able to like run them down. But lap times, like just raw performance and lap time, depending on if it was early or late, was really similar. But it sounds like the A7's a different animal.
Yeah, the A7 is its own beast.
Does anybody ever try anything outside of Hoosier, or is it just like if you're getting slicks, you're getting Hoosiers?
So we've only really talked about the street classes. Once you get to modified, you can run a true slick, like a true racing slick, not a DOT slick. Yeah. So street mod technically needs to be a DOT tire. So, but once you get to the mod classes, they'll run Goodyears or Avons or
just whatever the hell.
Hoosiers. That is like a true slick tire that, if you drove it on the street for 10 miles, they'd freak the fuck out. But yeah, no one in street mod or any of the street prepared classes really run anything but Hoosiers now. 15 or 20 years ago, almost, people were running a Kumo V710. Which was an inexpensive within about a half second of a Hoosier. They lasted longer too, which is why they're attractive, but they stopped making those. So, it's A7 or nothing. And the A7s aren't that more expensive than the AO52s. It's still $2,000 a set once you do 315. So
once you step it up, that's what you're looking at.
And they don't last longer either. So like
no, they don't. Not at all.
60 runs. They're good for about 60 runs before they fall off. They'll cord at like 75 or 80 runs. The AO52s fall off at 70 runs. So it's not like you're getting this monstrous.
Dan's like, at least you don't have to run RT660s. I mean,
well, there is
you say that
required to run 660s.
I think that's what Falcon's thing is now, because I'm kind of mad at that tire. I don't know if you've heard, but either way, like I have no problems with being forced to run a particular tire as long as everybody is forced to run that. And if you have an all-wheel drive Subaru, a crappier tire may work to your advantage. But one of the things that actually kind of brings me to my an interesting point. Subarus tend to be very competitive in autocross. At least all-wheel drive ones. Well, you say that, and then the BRZ is also fantastic too. So, like, performance Subarus tend to be competitive within autocross, extremely competitive within autocross. It's not like I'll be the first to tell you in time attack. One of the reasons I love I love grid life is you see all different types of cars.
Right.
But it's hard when you're modifying, something that was originally designed to take grandma to the grocery store in the middle of the winter, or something based off of that versus, a full blast, performance vehicle, something like a Corvette, that was designed from the ground up to be a race car. We're dealing with 4 struts, a fairly high center of gravity, comparatively aerodynamically just gross. But when you're talking about autocross, most of that gets thrown out the window, and because of the way the classing works, Subarus tend to be very competitive. So if you are really in love with a Subaru, and you want a fair fight, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by not looking into this. I mean, how many Subarus did you see there? And again, this is a national event, so everybody's bringing their best guns.
There was, I personally probably saw 65 or so.
That's
because
crazy.
I was there all week. So we showed up on Sunday afternoon. So I organized the paddock parking for the Iowa region,
Yep.
Iowa, DMVR region, and Great River region. For some reason, Iowa has 3 SCCA regions. Doesn't make sense. It is what it is. And I organized the paddock for all of us, and so that everyone has a spot and everything. So me and my friend Eric show up super early so that we can make sure everything's organized. So we got to see everybody come in. But to your point about seeing everything, the XA, top 3 in XA this year was a 04 STI, a 2011 Lotus Evora, and then a 2006 Mitsubishi Evo. Like that was 1, 2, 3. And 4th place was a BMW 325i. So it's a hugely, diverse group that is running. But
how do they decide who sits down and decides what goes into what class?
D Street is mostly the twins, the new ones, but there is Type R's. There is the Elantra N is surprisingly good in D Street. It got 5th place. Although the guy driving is kind of a maniac, so I understand. But then you look at the wild class of C Street, which is literally all ND2 Miatas. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the 100% of the class was, I think there was one ND1 Miata, and it was 56 cars. So it was 56 Miata, basically all on Bridgestones, autocrossing together. So there's diversity when you look at the whole thing, but there are some classes that are very, niche, because that's just what's competitive for those classes.
Yeah. So
because it's not fair to pin like a Miata against a Subaru, because sometimes it's course dependent. Sometimes you can dig out of a corner, or sometimes it's a momentum course. So like that's why they kind of split up the classes, even though the C Street Miata would have done just fine in, a lot of other classes. So who decides like what goes into what class? Who's the gatekeeper? Who when a new car comes out goes, this probably needs to be in there? And how often does this happen and them go, yeah, it's really not competitive in there, let's move it, or let's bump it up, this is dominating this, like you just said, it was a nothing but Miata class. Like who makes these decisions? So there's a lot of, now this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, but there's a lot of committees, and there's a lot of boards of executives and everything. The main one's called the SEB, which is the Solo Events Board, and any new car that comes out, they'll place it in the class where they think it's going to fit without throwing everything out. They don't want to make a new car an overdog where everyone has to buy this new car to be competitive. That happened to the Corolla. So they pinned the Corolla, the GR Corolla, in D Street with the twins and all the other WRXs and STIs. The Type R kind of fits and makes sense. Well, the GR Corolla won its first event, like the entire event. It got first place overall. And they immediately moved it to B Street, which is Supras and Caymans and a bunch of other really fast cars, because they were afraid it was too fast for the class. Yeah. So if they run into an overdog like that, like they will act super fast because they don't want, people to try and track down, especially a low volume car like the Corolla, to like try to get an edge, because people are nuts.
Well, yeah, and not only that, that'll like a Corolla that's supposed to be a $40,000 car. People will pay $60,000 for it. That's ridiculous.
Right. But there is the guy who did this to us in the Corolla came to nationals, and he did very well. He was second in his class in the B Street class he was just behind a Supra. So the guy can fucking wheel. There's no question there. But so once talking about how things work again, once you're in a class, each class has its own, they call them ACs. I think it's advisory committee, I think is what it stands for. So each one has its own, and those ones help decide rule sets and rule changes. And you have to write letters, like literally it used to be a letter that you would mail. Now there's a web form you can fill out to write a letter. And those letters get to these committees, and the committees go, yeah, we don't give a shit. Thank you for your input is like their main thing they do. So there's a couple guys that have their license plates that say TYFYI, like thank you for your input, because they just ignore us all the time.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to change Street Mod so that it doesn't die. And for years now, the biggest hindrance in Street Mod is the bumper beam. We have to use the factory bumper beam. And it's hugely detrimental to only Subaru, and specifically only the GD Subaru, if we're being nitpicky, because the GC can wiggle stuff around. The GR and the VA have more space. The GD just gets boned. And
so what is it about the bumper beam? Like, is it you can't fit a big enough intercooler? Is it a cooling problem? Is it just weight? Like, what's the problem?
We can't fit a front mount. So the only way to fit a front mount up there is to remove the AC, put the front mount where the AC was, and then either pinch a radiator behind it, which makes it really tight. You don't get a lot of airflow out, and you're super close to the header now. Or you run a trunk-mounted radiator, which was my alternative. So, I spent a ridiculous amount of money.
I love how they're like, you have to keep your front bumper beam.
For safety.
For safety, but you're allowed to you're allowed to modify your car to the point where you put a rear mounted radiator.
Correct. With 200-degree fluid like 15 inches from my back, like that's super safe. That's kind of the stuff that's super annoying, which is one of the reasons we're seeing what I'm calling an exodus, which is people moving to XA, is because these limitations now they're becoming uneconomical for a lot of people, because people don't want to do custom shit. Let's be honest. Like, you want to be able to find parts that fit and install parts that fit. And then, down the road, if you want to take your ETS front mount and rotate the intake and run a different turbo and, shorten the piping, sure. But the first time you do it, you don't want to spend $4,000 making it fit, or like finding somebody to custom make stuff. So it's a big hindrance on getting people in. And honestly, the biggest issue that I see with the current structure of Street Mod is that it scares people away, because they come in going, oh, I haven't done that many mods to my car. I'll be with other street cars. And then we're like, no, you have a bigger turbo. Now you're playing with my car, or you're with an Audi that's on.
So has Street Mod turned into almost a catch-all?
It used to always be the catch-all.
Yeah.
Like, that's where everybody would end up, essentially. Like, if there was, for a while, probably only a couple years ago, blow-off valves weren't allowed in most classes. So, like, if you had a blow-off valve, you got bumped to Street Mod. And a lot of SCCA guys are super sticklers. They're like, yep, you got to go. It's like,
yep, this is what's up.
Like, he's not going to be fast. This is his first time here. Or her first time here. They're not going to be competitive. Like, there's like 9 people in the history of autocross that were competitive their first time. Like, like literally.
Well, I mean,
So.
it's not. So it's hard to explain. I'm trying to figure out how I want to approach this. But long story short, one doesn't simply just be good at autocross. Okay.
Yeah. Correct.
It is kind of a learned skill set. And I have noticed that, and not that it doesn't take a ton of skill, but it's just drastically different than your typical performance driving in some ways. That's why, like, we were having a conversation about a guy, he's talking about oil pans and stuff like that. And honestly, like, some of the movements and crazy stuff that you guys do, it's so drastically violent compared to other forms. Like, again, even time attack, we're hauling ass, crazy big power, aero, whatever, but the corners tend to be more sweeping. Even tight corners for us are comically huge for you guys. And it's, you guys are going, full tilt boogie down to damn near a complete stop first gear, hairpins and things like that. We're not doing that.
So nationals, so a big thing, I just want to cut you off here. Sure. Nationals, like big events, in most of the bigger regions, you'll never find a first gear corner. Like, everybody hates first gear corners. The only reason you see those are because small lots. So if you don't have a choice but to slow people down that much, at nationals, like, we had our last corner on the West course was a slow down right-hander that was more than 90 degrees. And I think the lowest I saw was like 26 or 27 miles an hour. And that's still second gear, pinning it and getting out of it. Yeah. But most of it, you're at the top of second. And in my STI, we've geared my STI to run 72 miles an hour in second on purpose, because you're in the meat of like 50, mid 50s to 70 miles an hour for the majority of the course.
Sure, that makes sense. So your goal is basically stick the thing in second and pray to God you don't need to use anything else.
Correct, and that's what we've geared it for. So we geared it for. I have a 354 front pinion with a 1-to-1 center and a 354 rear diff. So my second gear just goes forever.
So this is another thing that, like, it's how you would approach modifying your vehicle. Because again, you're trying to make the most out of second gear. Let's put it that way.
Right.
You need to be looking at the bottom of your power band just as much as you are the top. Like in my situation, I don't really have to worry about anything below 5,000 RPM ever.
Right.
Ever. Right. But you would. So you have to think things like boost threshold mean the world to you. Peak power actually means significantly less than if you can get a turbo coming on 500 RPM sooner for you is night and day, when I might not even notice it.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I try to do, and I've been in the Subaru world for a really long time, is ask questions about people's builds and like what they're doing.
Yep.
Because it matters so much. Like, hey, I'm going to autocross, but I don't really care about it, is totally different than I'm going to autocross and I want to beat Tim White, or I want to beat Kenny Roller, who just won D Street. Like, holy shit. Okay, that's totally different. Like, we're going to approach this with a different mentality than, I'm building a purpose car.
I'm building a fun car that might see autocross sometimes, or, I used to get this I'm building a street car that might see autocross, but, mostly I use it. How you would approach that is so drastically different. Because they're looking for an experience car, not raw time, like hundredths of a second mean the world in an autocross course. Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the intention too, is like you kind of sit down and figure out where you want to be. And because we can build a car, and IAG and everybody can build a car that does really well at track days, time attack, and autocross. You can do it, but you're going to be a little bit short of the pointy end in both of them.
Yeah, you're going to make compromise unless you are to focus. Right. You can make a car that's like of the, let's say the top 80th percentile across the board. But you're if you want to win and you're against other people who are trying to win, then you need to build for that discipline. And how you build that within autocross is different than how you would build it for, say, time attack or something else, hill climbs, drag racing. It just how you would approach that is so drastically different. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the same principles apply, but like one of the things that you guys, I tend to see, especially within the suspension side of stuff, is where I'm looking for stability. You guys are actually looking to almost upset the car so you can get it to rotate a ton harder. One of the things I saw you tend to see a lot with autocrossers and like closer to stock classes is them unhooking the front sway bar to try to promote oversteer. That's something I'd never recommend somebody doing on a road course. But I 100% understand why you would do that within autocross.
So with one of the cool things about autocross, in my opinion, is like when you get to the pointy end, people are doing some weird shit you wouldn't see anybody else do.
Yes, like, and it's crazy stuff.
They'll run like an absurd amount of like rear toe, like toe out, just to get the car to step or rotate off throttle. So like, we've all done this before where you have your alignment screwed up and you're pinning it and it's so much fun. It's loaded up. It does what you want. You let go and it just snaps. You're like, oh, that's a problem. And you go to your alignment guy and he's like, wow, what'd you do?
What'd you hit?
There's autocrossers that do that on purpose because they they need to get it to rotate because they don't have any other modifications they're allowed to do. To get that rotation. So like they can't change spring rate or they can't add a limited slip differential. Like there's
what they do
you gotta
instead,
be careful listening to what people say on the internet sometimes because someone's like, oh yeah, I run this. It's like, yeah, but why?
Yeah,
are you
exactly.
doing that
in what or limited? Well, I mean, I run a 255 on an 8.5-inch wheel, but yeah, that's because you're limited within your class. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Should you do that or not do that? Sure. That's a whole different conversation, but should somebody who maybe doesn't have those limits or somebody who maybe does have those limits and, somebody from outside of that, like me trying to tell somebody with, a limit of an 8.5-inch wheel, what size tire they should run. Who the hell am I? Like I can help them to a certain extent, but I gotta be real. I'm not an autocross genius. I can help you make a really wide power band, things like that. But when you get into intricacies of class, you better start talking to people who have ran that class or, you do it yourself and start trying to get an understanding of how things work.
And honestly, that's my opinion anyway. My experience in the autocross Subaru world is once you get to the point where you need to ask questions and the questions to ask, there's people there. There's people that know, and there's people gatekeeping some stuff, but a lot of people are super open about, oh yeah, man, try this tire pressure. Oh, what's your damper set at? Like, are you two-way? Can we change the compression right now? And it's crazy that you would think we're battling this guy for a 1/10 of a second for the last trophy spot, and he's like,
and he's more than happy.
You're going too late on the slalom. Like, turn in sooner. You're like, holy shit, that's like a 2/10 gain just there. Like, why did he tell me that? And it's super cool. A time attack's not different.
Time attack, you'll get the same thing, but then it's almost like the more similar the cars are and the more competitive it is, the less likely they're going to be to tell you that. And I that's the same way in time attack. Let's go down to like Sunday Cup or even Club TR. I can tell you during the event, because the cars are so similarly modified, and this is nothing. I don't want anybody to take this against, say, like Dana or some of the rest of the guys in that class. Peter, let's say Peter and Dana, since they have cars that are extremely similar, I can tell you Dana is not going to show video to Peter during the event. Now, after the event, by all means, and the difference with time attack is the track won't change. Maybe the temps and stuff will change, but like if it's a line or approach difference, that's something that track will be there next year and you can attempt that. But with autocross, like I think, like, let's talk about that group of Miatas that were all like on top of each other. Okay,
yeah.
They're all in essentially the same car. I bet you there's a little less sharing going on there.
No, there's still a lot.
Yeah,
definitely. Now, the other thing too with those cars, though, I mean, again, the thing is, like, if me telling you that you're doing something wrong makes you faster, you would have learned that on your own. Like,
that's true.
Like, well, I'm not gonna sit here and being at nationals or being at a local, like, since this course is never gonna change, or is never gonna exist again. You're never gonna see it. I want you to drive it right. I want you to enjoy it. Like, if
By
I
all
know
means,
you're flipping the same
but
cone,
let's say like a car setup thing instead of like a line situation. How about like a car setup thing? Like, and again, I don't think you're going to see that as much in the class that you're running because you have a fairly wide spread of cars. So I bet you guys are really open with information, as opposed to a class that is pretty much comprised of all one vehicle. I have a feeling at the event they'd be a lot less apt to tell each other what tire pressures they're running. You know what I mean?
I think they're not going to advertise it. But if you went up and asked, they're not.
They'd probably they'd come off as a cock if they didn't tell you at that point. Yeah. But they're not going to be like, if anybody needs setup ideas, come talk to me. Right. But then again, more than likely, that's not the guy who's winning either. So,
also, the joke there too is like, find out your tire pressure. Like, you're not always next to your car. We got 60 cars going. Like, you just lean over and put your tire pressure gauge next to their tire. So
that's true.
Like, if you really wanted to find out, you could. But normally people are super open about it. Now, there's like, you're not wrong about if you're literally battling with someone and you don't like them or they're a dick or whatever. Like, you don't have to help them, but there's a lot of, especially when you get to the mod classes, like kart mod, which is the shifter carts, and you get to demodified, which is 1.3 liter turbo engines or K20s and these like little Lotus 7 type things. Like, everybody is helping everybody until someone becomes a dickhead, and then you're just like, yeah, that guy.
And I mean, you're going to run into dickheads no matter what. And I mean, there's dickheads in every organization. There's dickheads in grid life, and nobody will help them. But then on the flip side of things, like, I'll be Peter and Dana are good buddies, you know what I mean? And the reason I'm pulling them out is because they have very similar cars. Or let's talk about Sunday Cup. I have a feeling if somebody were to make a change they think's going to really help, and it's going to get them near the podium or on the podium or maintain their lead or maybe get them the record, whatever, I don't think they're going to be super forthcoming. And like, if they made a small change and that same change would help their direct competitor, whether they're homies or not.
Yeah, and a lot of this is necessarily going to just tell the world, like, make a post on Facebook that, I figured it out. But the other thing too with SCCA that they're famous for is protests. Like, the street classes, like, if the famous one from this year was somebody had a welded on sway bar and reinforcement tab in E Street that's not legal, and somebody protested them, and everybody lost their shit. But it's like, protests aren't bad. Like, it's rule clarification. Like, it's to make sure everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. But there's
protests have never made me mad. Some people get really stupid about protests. Yeah. And in anything, my thing with protests is I look at the rule book as a even no matter how convoluted or annoying it may be, that is basically a contract of everybody who's competing in that class to adhere by, so we can all be friends. Okay, right. And so if you are blatantly cheating or something is wrong, even with my vehicle, I would want to know, because one, I don't want to win with a vehicle that isn't legal, and two, like, you want to make sure that we have all agreed to a level playing field. you know, and that when I just believe you keep the competition more pure if you're not overlooking shit. You know, people aren't running around with 3 inches of extra splitter for multiple years after they've been protested multiple times, and they have to run all the way up to Toyota to get it figured out. I'm not going to mention any names, but we know who we're talking about. You know, things of that nature, that sour stuff. And then people will get mad because somebody's rear wing will look like it's a little bit out. And they're like, man, that don't look right. And they protest and somebody goes over and measures it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're fine, you know? And you know, but people get butthurt because of that. I've never understood that. Like, you protested me? Yeah. You're like, it just looks fun. Yeah, I would. Yes. Okay, cool. Sweet.
Let's prove it's okay. Like,
yes. Not only that, like, if I got it that close and it is legal, then you feel like a badass.
Right. And the SCCA, what they do every year is before nationals, they give everybody a heads up. They say, hey, you need these 5 classes. You need to pull their 2 tires off their car in impound after your last run, and we'll give the opportunity for everybody to inspect the cars.
Okay.
Is there a formal thing they're looking for? Who knows? Did somebody ask if something was going to be out of bounds? Like, maybe they saw something on Facebook where somebody was running, you know, something weird and they're not supposed to. Who knows? But they kind of do it as like a blanket thing, so it's not pinpointing anybody specific.
Yeah.
There was one year where they had this little jig that measured Street Mod's wing height when we were getting weighed after the last run. It was like a little 6-inch block that sat on a ruler that went all the way out from the roof line to the back of the car, and they put it on top of your roof. And if your wing made it not level anymore, you were disqualified. Like, it was pretty cool. Like, I was like, oh, that's neat. I was right. My measurement was good. But
all means that's just decent scrutineering though.
Right. But Street Mod also has a no whiny protest rule. It's a gentleman's agreement. If someone's splitter is 0.5 inches too big, like, we're not gonna yell it. We're not gonna protest it. But at the same time, we're gonna be like, hey, can you fix it?
Yeah, you need to get that fixed for next time, kind of thing. And that's happens.
Not the reason you beat me. Like, that's not the reason I didn't get a trophy. But like, we spend money to make our shit correct. Yeah. So you need to do it too. And normally people are like, all right, cool. Yeah, my bad. It just moved or it shifted or I measured off the wrong.
Shit happens. And anybody who gets bent out of shape over half an inch can kiss my ass. Okay. Exactly. It's people who like, we're talking hard measurements, you know, an inch or more. Like, that's a little different. That's just plain bad measuring.
Right. Exactly.
And getting butthurt over that, I've never understood that. I mean, maybe that's just me or whatever, but that's rules. Rules are rules, as Dylan just said. Dylan says he's going to protest ourselves. I think we should do that.
I mean, that's fair. And one of the things that I love about the SCCA too is, like, if there's a problem, the best way to get clarification is to do a formal protest. Like,
yes.
And it allows them to be like, oh, yep, that rule is a little gray. This car falls, they're legal, but I still want to protest it, so it's formal and it's documented.
And then it's documented, and then there's a precedent for it. And that makes sense. There's nothing wrong with trying to get a precedent set. So then, if it is legal, then you know you can do that, you know, and or something of that nature.
And my role in Street Mod is to do shit like that. So, like, what I did a couple years ago when I did my radiator and I did my chassis mount wing, like, I was pushing kind of the gray area, because the way that I read the rules, it was totally fine. I looked up and got clarification that it should be fine. But once I went through and nobody protested it, it's fine. Like, it's allowed to mount your wing to the deck floor of your trunk. It's allowed to do the radiator this way. So sometimes you just need somebody to be willing to get protested and denied, or not get protested and greenlit.
Scott is saying grid life people will protest well before they mention it to the offender because it allows their times to get disqualified. For the longest time, it didn't disqualify times. And if it's a blatant issue, that's a little different. If we're talking like inches or more, that's a problem. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, like with hard measurements, that's a problem. If it's a gray area, usually it isn't even a protest. And I'll be the first to tell you, I have protested stuff, but it isn't a protest. It's more of hey, Abe or whoever happens to be doing it, you should probably go take a look at this, and you just make sure. And then usually that is the protest. Now, it was me and like 5 other street mod people who protested Sally's wing when Sally was still running with Grid Life. So she was still with IAG and with Grid Life and all that. We protested. I'm telling you, that wing, there was no fucking way from looking at it that it was within 5 inches. Okay? So first they went and measured it sitting in their pits and with a plumb bob and everything, but the ground wasn't exactly level and they actually failed. So they took it over to the alignment pad over at Gingerman and measured it, and it was like to the millimeter perfect. But it was a bunch of us. We all protested it. And I tell you what, every freaking one of us ate crow, but it was a formal protest. We all did it. And we all ate shit for it. Fred, the main tech here, put that whole thing together, and I'm telling you, man, he couldn't have measured that any more perfect. it was so dead freaking on. I'm talking to the effing millimeter. But it was legal. And
so one of the things with SCCA too is it costs money to file a protest.
It used to in Grid Life, and I think they should bring that back. It used to be $20.
It's $80 to file a protest.
Maybe they should up the price because then it's worth it. I would be down to throw put $50 on the line or something.
If you were correct and they were illegal, you get your money back.
If you don't, the SCCA gets paid.
Some SCCA gets paid. Now, it gets deeper, though. So if it's like, hey, I think this person overbored their cylinder, and you file the protest, they need to go and get their engine pulled and confirm that they're legal.
Ooh, now, okay, that's kind of shitty. Now, you got to...
They are legal. The person who filed the protest has to pay the bill.
Ouch.
And the person, if they were illegal, the person who was illegal has to pay the bill.
So what happens if somebody just says, I don't know, let's say I'm in Club TR, okay? Mm-hmm. Or let's say I'm in some stock class, some like Spec Miata style class, and somebody calls me out on that shit. And then I end up being legal. And then I go to like, hey man, you got to pay this bill for this. And then they just ghost me. Does the SCCA like kick them out forever? And I'm just stuck with this like $5,000-$6,000 bill because some dude hates me?
I'm not 100% sure because I've never had to do it personally. But I know the SCCA is involved in making sure things get sorted.
I would be interested to know if the SCCA then turns around and flips the bill if they like got ghosted. If it comes back, they were legal.
I think because I'm pretty sure like you have to. It's not a joke. You know what I mean? Like I don't think there's an opportunity to ghost. I think you have to prepay.
Okay,
like,
that's my I know those guys who are doing Spec Miata, like at the top bleeding edge of Spec Miata. Yeah. That's no joke. Like those dudes are paying a lot of money to be there. They're paying pro level shit to be at the top. I've heard crazy stories of like going to an engine builder to build 3 engines, which are essentially stock engines, but putting 3 stock engines together totally just to see which one makes the most horsepower and then buying that. Right. Like these guys aren't fucking around. And 2 horsepower is worth 20 grand to them, So
when you have like $4,000 on the line, if you're cheating, like you're just gonna pony up and be like, nah, don't do it. I'm not legal.
That's true. Like yeah.
Because if
you don't know though, how much would that suck if you didn't realize like your engine builder fucked you and you didn't know? These guys like you went to them because they build the best engines, but come to find out they've just been cheating the whole time. How much would that suck?
That would suck. But hopefully you have documentation, and if you talk to the engine builder, like, hey, we're doing this, the engine builder would come clean, so you weren't stuck with a $5,000 teardown bill.
Dude, that is terrible.
That would suck, though. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about the engine builder not doing what they say they did.
Yeah, because it would be so easy. You know what I mean? Right. It would be so easy that, like, oh man, we don't want to find another block for this. Let's just fucking stick some oversized pistons in and kick him out the door. Right. He'll never know the difference.
Wow, this guy's fast.
Oh man.
Yeah. So one of the other things before we dip or anything is one of the beauties about SCCA and about Nationals specifically is when something breaks
Yeah.
and everybody just swarms to try to come to a solution.
Yes.
So this year, Chris Cladu, the person you used in your photo,
yeah,
his sixth run. So he had two drivers. His co-driver did his last run. He revved up to do the two-step at the launch. He didn't build enough boost, either tune issue, atmospheric issue, whatever it was, or not enough throttle. Who knows? Snapped the output shaft. Just in the trans, just snapped right in half.
Yep, middle
so
door.
Being an 05, you could, if it was an open on the diff, the center diff, it wouldn't move at all. But you roll it up a little bit, and it would get enough, movement, and it would put enough power.
You'd essentially try to lock the diff and then drive around in front wheel drive a little bit.
And he could get back to paddock. He could get back to his parking spot. So they figure it out. We tried to call in the Nebraska crew to figure out if we could find a output shaft laying around, and nobody had one. But Zach over at ZF Designs in Denver, where Glady's from, had one on a shelf. Surprise.
Yep.
He builds a bunch of transmissions.
Imagine that.
They look to overnight it, and then they realize it's too expensive to overnight, and they can't guarantee it'll show up before 2. Chris convinces his brother-in-law to pick up the part in Denver, get on a plane to Lincoln, and come hang out for a couple days, round trip, to deliver the part by 11 p.m. That ended up being cheaper than the overnight shipping anyway. So he got a vacation out of it. And by the time the plane landed, they already had the tail section off the transmission, the output shaft that was broken completely out of the drive shaft, and everything was ready to go back in the next morning because we raced heat 4, which wasn't until 2 in the afternoon. We worked heat 1, but we were able to find a replacement for Dwight, Chris's co-driver mechanic, to work on the car during heat 1. So they removed that broken output shaft and they put the brand new one back in. And if you've ever done that, that's not a fun task to do on a bench, let alone on concrete and
it's
under a car. It's
not bad on a bench, but under a car, it sucks.
Yeah.
I've actually helped both ways on that, and it's not great.
All the little bearings and shit that like to fall out. It's just you get it in and you're happy. So they got it all back together before the end of the third heat, and they were test driving it around, and they didn't miss any runs in the afternoon. It ran great, and they ended up both of them got trophies. So
that's sick.
It's so wild that they breaking an output shaft is shitty, but I'm glad that's what it was and not something more internal. It was.
I got to make a plug real quick. We do make aftermarket output shafts that are significantly stronger. Just throwing it out there.
Correct.
Just throwing that out there. If you guys are doing some autocross stuff and you're trying to leave the line hard and shit happens, it may be worth looking into. We actually built them for drag racers, but a lot of people don't realize
autocrossers break shit too.
Autocrossers break shit too. If you're going to be doing that sort of shit, it's something you might want to look into.
And the joke is to have a fuse somewhere in the system, and so that if something does need to break, it's easy to fix.
Yes.
So having a rear axle as the fuse isn't a bad idea.
No, and that's actually I don't think a lot of people understand what you're saying. But so long story short, what he's trying to say is if you have a cheap and inexpensive, easy to replace item as the thing that is going to fail, it may not behoove you to stick a stronger, beefier, more expensive item in there so it doesn't fail, because it's going to find the next weakest link. And maybe that next weakest link, say your output shaft, because he's probably got big beefy axles, an R180 diff, a good rear, a good drive shaft. He's got the beefy pieces up until there, and what would have maybe been a rear axle snapping now turns into the output shaft, which is much more of a pain in the ass to not only acquire, but it's more of a pain in the ass to install. This is one of the things we were kind of contemplating on when we were talking about replacing my shift finger in my trans. We're like, well, if we replace that, what's the next thing that's going to break? Am I going to start breaking forks? Am I going to break gears? Whatever. Thankfully, I just went faster in other ways and stopped flat foot shifting. But still, like, if something is continually breaking, let's say you do fix that, your point of failure will move. And you need to figure out, is it better if that other thing breaks?
Yeah, and eventually, ultimately you want the tires to slip so that the pressure just goes that way. But sometimes it doesn't.
In a perfect world, you want the fuse to be the tires.
Right. Right. And not third gear or first gear or the front pinion or the input shaft. Holy shit, that would suck.
Yes. I don't know how to. Yeah, I'm having a bad day. I'm going home.
Yeah. And that's what happens. But luckily, people come together and they're like, we can rebuild him. And then, everyone just tears into it.
Yep. So. I mean, that's half the fun. I mean, I can't tell you how many times not only I've been working on shit on my own car and people come over and just start lending a hand, having a good time, I've always found it's way more entertaining to work on somebody else's car than working on your own.
Right.
Like, there is no, I don't give a fuck what it is. I can do it,
Let's do it.
You're missing half of your car. You just put a rod into space. Yeah, we can fix it.
We'll find a replacement. I'll make a couple phone calls. It'll be here tomorrow. Let's just get it out.
Yep, Dylan's got the old pirate up there. It's definitely pirate energy. Who wants
that? Oh yeah. I think that's the most pirate energy you can get.
It totally is. When you're over fucking up somebody else's car, it's the best. Yeah. That's always good times. It's fun till it starts seeming like work, but as long as everybody's smiling and having a good time with it, then whatever.
Exactly.
I can tell you, Josh is having all sorts of fun with his car right now. He's in the chat right now, and Josh is they're running into all sorts of fun problems. We're not going to go into exactly what's up, but he's having a rough time with that car he's putting together.
I think I'm familiar.
Yeah, Josh might be pulling his motor. We'll see what the situation is. It's an ugly situation. Scott, I swapped my clutch at your trailer at Lime Rock last year and it was fun and got help from everyone. There you go. See, Scott? And then I had every fucking tool known to man. That's when I had all of my, that was when I was at peak Milwaukee Heights. I had everything. Okay. And then, after that event, about 2 weeks later, almost all of it was stolen. But yes, man, and it was great. And people were just kind of hanging out. Hey man, you need something? Hey, I could really use this, hooking you up. You just kind of propped your wheels up on the back of, I think it was Bailey's trailer, and you just went to town. So you had kind of a mini lift. That was actually kind of cool. That was fun hanging out with you. So yeah, I mean, that's just how it works. And the same thing happens at grid life events too. That's just motorsports in general. Like if you're worried you're not going to have help, as long as you're like a reasonably friendly person and not an asshole, more than likely people are going to help you if it's within reason. You can't expect somebody you don't know to stay up all night and kill themselves, but they might.
As long as it doesn't involve money and it's just manual labor.
Most of the time people are like, screw it, man. Let's do it.
You got food here, right? You got some water.
Yeah. If you feed me and you got the basic tools, or if the reality is there in some way to get it done, I'm sure
right.
People will try.
Where else are we going? We're not going anywhere else. Like
that's the truth, especially if you're staying at the track. Screw it, let's party. Grid life changed my view of problems at the track, and that's how it should be. That's how any track day really should be. If you're having a bad weekend at the track, a bad weekend at the track should be better than any weekend you're at. Same thing if you're going to like an autocross event or something else. I'm sure a bad weekend at Nationals is still better than any weekend. So cool.
I lost you again.
Oh, well, that's all I'm saying is like a bad weekend at the track or a bad weekend at Nationals is still better than any other weekend. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. We had so much smoke and dust and wind but we still loved it,
Yep.
I'm not going back next week because, I can do this 5 days out of the year. I can't do it every week.
Yep. So do you know who, oh, this is going to kick my ass. Why can I not think of his name now? Bill. I cannot remember his last name. He drove the BMW in the WRC event down in, he drove the car all the way down to Mexico. Oh no. Somebody in the chat, help me out. Who's the guy who drove that shit ass BMW all the way down to, WRC Mexico and competed? I think he won his class. It was like 20 years ago we did this. It was forever ago. And this is going to kick my ass because I know this guy. He's really big into E30s. Shit. The guy is a legend. Come on. Somebody knows who I'm talking about. Somebody in the chat. Tell me who I'm talking about. It's Bill something. It's going to kill me. I'm looking it up now. Yes, that's him. Give me the frickin' name. Bill Caswell. You know who Bill Caswell is? Well, that's a damn shame. Look up Bill Caswell. Long story short, this guy's kind of a legend in its own world. They tried to make a movie out of him. A ton of cool stories, actually. He came to a Grid Life event, right? But his big thing is he was like an accountant or something and quit his job. Took a shit BMW, drove it all the way down to WRC Mexico. Won his class and drove it all the way home. It was just a huge thing. They made a movie about this guy. Well, we're gonna make a movie about this guy. The guy who plays Hawkeye actually owns the rights to this movie, and the only reason the movie hasn't been made yet is because he got the job as Hawkeye. He was gonna play him in the movie that he was also going to produce. And then he got the job playing Hawkeye. But long story short, this guy, Bill Caswell, he's kind of half drunk, hanging out, telling me all sorts of crazy shit about Daytona and crazy stuff he's done. Like after that happened, he got job offers to do all sorts of crazy shit. He drove prototypes and all sorts of stuff, right? This dude's hanging out, chilling with us, and some guy with a kind of a crummy ass BMW is having all sorts of crummy ass BMW problems. And Bill Caswell just starts working on his car. The guy had no idea that the dude working on his car, how much of a legend he even was. But Bill's just like, dude, this is what's up. And just starts freaking wrenching away at the car. And I think he still ended up turning laps. That's that mentality, that track mentality is. And that pirate mentality, I guess, is that bleeds into everything. Some of it is the Subaru community. Some of it is just people with like-minded people, with like Time Attack or Autocross or whatever. That's something I found just motorsports people in general tend to be really giving and helpful if they can be. Until people get shitty, people are as nice as they are. It's the truest form of innocent till proven guilty.
Right. And I want to race with you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want.
Yes. Oh, nobody wants to win because your car broke.
Right.
That's not a win.
No.
You know what I mean? And I that sucks. Nobody wants to see that. Okay. So that's no fun for anybody. All right. Well, I'm going to open the floor up to some questions. Does anybody have any questions for Drew pertaining to autocross things? Maybe goofy AN fittings? Don't you have some cool guy fittings you just recently produced that allow you to replace your crossover pipe with AN fittings? Yep. That is sick. That is something I think Dylan and I are probably going to work on stealing from you in the off season.
I got a couple sets still available, but it converts the factory coolant crossover on the top of the engine to an ORB fitting. So then you can run it to a swirl pot. You can join it up and do a T fitting and kind of route it around.
What do you think of that, Dylan?
I mean, you guys did it on something. You've done it on a.
No, I think we have, but I think we've made them, but you actually produced it.
Yeah, I still have probably about 10 or so on hand. I made a run of them last year.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's just the weird stuff like that. But once you get deeper into the AN stuff with ORBs and clamshells and, how to convert stuff over and upsizing and downsizing fittings and hoses, it gets spicy. You just gotta. You know what you should do?
You should literally make a 2015 steering rack into everything kit. Like, you need this size washer if you're using this subframe for the, because it's slightly offset. You should that more sport piece is kind of funky. Like, make something in that same ballpark and lines and everything.
I mean, I'm holding on to it. I have the more sport piece in my hand right now.
Yeah, I've got one going onto my car right now too. I'm finally going to be switching off the 07 STI rack, so hopefully I don't have to shuffle steer as much anymore.
Yeah, and the steering rack stuff is spicy because, as you guys know at IAG, getting the right pressure line is a whole different game. And finding a pressure tester that can get it high enough to where you can confirm it's good is fun too. That's one thing that people forget with power steering is
it's really high pressure. Yeah,
you can't use a normal IN fitting.
I found that out the hard way.
Yeah, most people do. I'm like, this will be fine. This ain't fine. It sucks. It sucks when it's a small leak. It really sucks when the fitting blows up.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was the hose. The hose exploded.
Right. Oh, even better.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I don't know, we had it fixed in about 2 hours because we had the shit to fix it. But, you learn things. You really don't have a concept of how much pressure that's under till you realize it.
Seeing a split stainless braided line, you're like, ooh, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah. So Mark 1 Lap Escher, I'm not sure who that is. I'm assuming he's a GTI guy. Driving race cars to the track is fun, but not fun. No, driving race cars to the track is awful. It's awful. It is awful because you are worried the entire time that you have to drive that thing home.
You're worried driving there.
Especially if you're in a time attack car. If you got a splitter, maybe your tires are. Oh man. Yeah. He's a guy at NJMP with the 84 GTI. Yeah, dude, trailer. It'll change your life.
Really? Do it.
Yep. It was a joke. I lived that life. I did that with my 05 STI for a while. I even drove all the way to Road Atlanta and back like that from Chicago. Stupid. It's stupid. Don't do that. Josh, I love field repair. You need to live more dangerously. Shit. Dude, half of my fucking car is field repair. I think Dylan found that out pulling my steering rack out today.
We'll need to start building you some more spare hoses then, do we?
Yeah.
It's just field replacement, not field repair.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that's where we want to get in the future, where this thing settles, and then we're working on nothing but the outside of the car, and then so we can do things like we should probably have a spare this and a spare that, and some basic stuff.
I mean, IAG's got enough spare Pelican cases. Just have a Pelican case for each thing.
You ain't wrong. Someday.
You guys don't need these, right?
Hey, we haven't used the Pelican cases in a long time.
You're just sitting there, take them.
Yep. Yeah, no shit. These are all beat to shit anyway, so whatever.
Perfect. That's what you need.
That's exactly what I need. I'll just stack a whole shitload of random Pelican cases in my trailer.
I
can rebuild a whole boogie. No, with my luck, I'm not going to label it, or I'm going to put it on there with a Post-it note with intentions of labeling it, and the Post-it note will fall off.
Your kid walks in there and just moves all the Post-it notes around.
That's exactly what would happen. He stacks them all up in one spot. Like, thanks.
You left these in the trailer, Dad. Oh, crap. Thanks, buddy.
Oh, my God. All right. Well, I think we're going to call it. If nobody's got any questions, no big deal. I mean, we went for an hour and a half on dodging cones and other stuff. What got you into dodging cones?
So I bought my 05 STI on Halloween of 2004. Okay. And I saw a post on NASIC in the Southeast regions kind of board. And they're like, hey, there's an autocross here. And I was like, that sounds cool. And I registered for it, and I got lost in Hialeah. And then I found it, and then I met some of the best people in my life, the Pastelito Racing crew. And we autocrossed like mad from 05 to 2008. We probably did between 2 and 3 events a month, basically, the entire time. It was so wild. It was so much fun.
You went hard.
So, yeah. The biggest thing for me with autocross is, like, in any sport, really, is you find your group. You know what I mean? Like, you find your people, and then you kind of just embrace it. Like, this is what we did. We were all over South Florida, the west coast of Florida. We went up to Daytona and, a little bit further south of there. And it was a wild time. And it's just kind of the niche that I started building for, and it's, once you get a little too niche-y, I guess you could say, it's tough to branch. It's tough to pull out of it. So I very much like the $35 entry fee and the 1-day commitment. It's tough to turn that down.
No, that is one of the massive advantages, especially like, let's say Grid Life. Some of those events are 3 or 4 days, and they're halfway across the country. And so realistically, it's not just 1 day semi-local. It's you're driving halfway across the country to get to a particular track for 3 days for, $800-900 entry fee. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
I say that at the same time as having 3 sets of ZE40s and Hoosiers and all this other shit. So it's not really $1.
If you're going to compete at the bleeding edge of any motorsport, it's going to be expensive. Okay.
Right.
It just
regardless of what the entry fee is.
I think it all ends up costing the same amount. So
that's terrifying.
Yep.
But you're not wrong. You're definitely
I mean, it's just the truth, man. It's just the truth. So I don't care what you're doing. It is what it is.
Right. Oh, I mean, like you said earlier, Spec Miata, they spend $40,000 on an engine block. So.
What was Spec Miata was supposed to be cheap. The whole concept of that is, let's take this cheap car that handles really well and let's all race them evenly. And then people spend tens of thousands of dollars to make it as uneven as they possibly can.
And it's 2 horsepower.
For 2 horsepower. Like, how much is it going to cost me to tip these scales? And like, people are willing to pay it for their freaking, gift card to Wendy's. Like, there's nothing to win at the end of this shit.
They're still mid-pack.
Yeah. Because there's always some dude with more money. You know what I mean? It's Roger Penske's nephew is still going to destroy you.
Yeah. Well, and there's also more talent. So, like, you're always going to run into more money and more talent. So you just got to kind of have to figure out which one you can throw the most at and try to do well.
Yep. Really it is what it is. You can offset in almost any motorsport. You can offset talent with money. Almost.
Yeah, almost. Unless you do like street spec autocross, then you're about to be humbled by
That's one of the things I really like about
75-year-old guy driving a BRZ.
I really like street modified and grid life, and I'm assuming one of the reasons you like street modified where you're at is unless somebody comes in somebody else's very prepped car, they have to somehow acquire an extremely prepped car. It's not just acquire the right car, it's acquire the right car that is also prepped specifically for that class and then show up.
Exactly. And it's not something that you can build in a year either.
No, that's not something.
That's
not something you can even you like a year if you really knew what the hell you were doing, maybe. But that's something you really need to develop into. It's not, you can't just throw, a set of tires on a stock BRZ and go bang. You know what I mean?
Right. And even because you can throw 50, 60 grand at a build and get it done, but is it going to compete against the guy who's been doing this for 15 years in the same car?
No, who has probably spent maybe the same amount of money as you, but he or she has that setup developed. It's like coilovers. I've said this before. A well set up set of shit coilovers will outperform a shit set of freakishly expensive coilovers every time.
Yeah.
So
I would prefer the good ones so that they could be set up better. But
I agree. There's the ceiling is much higher, but it's if you see it's one of those, there may have been particular people out there running a particular starts with B, ends with Schwan, junk Taiwanese coilovers. They're sponsored by them. So people then say, well, this person's running those, right? They must be great. And really they're being paid to run those. And there's a lot to that. You know what I mean? And then
it gets deeper too. Like when you look into the YouTube and you look into where this is going and kind of follow the trail, you can't look at the surface, when you're trying to pick out.
You can't.
And it's what someone has in stock that they're trying to push. It's not what some sponsored guy with the graphics all over his car is running. You want to talk to people that have actually set them up and done it and use it. Because most people, you're going to find they have opinions and they're usually not pigeonholed into one brand. If you find someone who's only this is the only one you can run, you have to figure out why they're saying that.
Yes.
And it's usually because
it's a perfect example of that. And I'll be if you were to come up to me and you see a big old Fortunato sticker on the side of it, when they ask me what coilovers should I run, and the first thing I tell them is Fortunato, I have to be real. You as a consumer should take that with a grain of salt and do your own research. Okay? Because I have a big sticker on the side of my car. Now, I'm not paid by Fortunato, but I'm not going to lie. I get support from Fortunato. Now, I run Fortunatos because I've been with them a very long time. There's a lot with that relationship on why I maintain that relationship, and I really like their product. But I would be stupid to say that Owens, MCS, Moton, something if you were to spend a freakish amount more money, that you aren't going to get a superior product or whatever. It's just, it's if what were to come out of my mouth is the only thing you should purchase is Fortunato, that I'm in a really stupid area of the Dunning-Kruger curve. If I'm, that's falling out of my mouth. And
that's part of it too. It's if someone comes up and asks you for advice, you're not going to give them something that's just out of a brochure.
No,
you're going to figure out what they actually need before you tell them. If someone goes, I have $1,100, you're not going to tell them to buy MCSs.
No. And that's the difference. But I'll be the first one to tell you if somebody comes up to me and says, I got $1,100, I want to take my car to the track. What coilovers should I buy? I would say you need to skip a track day and you need to save some money and you need to buy some coilovers that aren't shit. Here's the minimum I would get. And, lay that out. But having those conversations, having that's the flip side of this. Having a somebody who's willing to tell somebody, you know, your minimum should be this, or telling them, like, instead of grabbing the quick sale, telling them really what they need to hear. There's another side to that too. But you should always, no matter what parts or whatever you see somebody running, you know, with stickers on the side of their car or whatever, by all means, have a conversation with them to see what that, you know, what the situation is with that. But take it with a grain of salt, me being one of them. Okay.
Yeah. My favorite bit is talking to people about what they want to do. That's the thing I love the most, because everyone has a different plan. They have a different goal. It is so much fun.
The conversation is rough at times, though. Like, I had a guy I was talking to today, and this is a daily topic, you know, and I asked him, so what do you use the car for? And, well, I want to make 500 wheel, or I want to make 700 wheel, or what. What do you use the car for? Oh, I want to make 700. You just want to make 700 horsepower? Like, what do you use the 700 horsepower for? Well, come to find out, it's his daily, and he goes to parking lot meets every once in a while. And I'm like, dude, you need 450. And I had a whole conversation about, let's do this. And, you know, you have to go down the road of what 700 actually is and all that. Or the flip side of stuff, you know, these guys who are like, like they're like, I want 700 horsepower. I want to go to the track. I don't think you know what that's about, you know, or the flip yet, or, you know, they're definitely worried about like lag or something like that, you know, and, you know, they feel that putting any larger of a turbo on their car may be a problem. You know, you run into that all over the place, but getting people to actually tell you what they want to use the car for is so hard sometimes, because all they're looking at is, I want 500 horsepower. Like, you need to get the fuck away from Instagram. Do you just want, if you want to do Instagram, let me know. Like, we can do Instagram.
And then what's your budget? I don't have one. Yeah, you do.
Yeah. What really is your budget? Because I could light 100 thou on fire tomorrow.
You have a budget. It's fine. I don't care what it is. I just need to know what it is, so I don't tell you to buy something you don't need.
Yeah. So we get halfway into this, and you go, and it doesn't get done, and then they're mad, which happens.
Right. Yeah, it does. It's the beauty about the sport. You know, people like to talk about stuff, and you kind of have to get them racing so that they can change their mind. Because, like,
dude, one of the best things I could tell anybody, and I've screamed it over and over, is if you have any plans on doing competition, read the fucking rule book before you start building a car. And people don't do that. They're just like, I want all this stuff, and then they end up in, you know, open or whatever that you were talking about, classes that were sticking people against like prototypes and weird shit. You know, like, they don't and it all because they decided to remove door cards. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing, dude? Always, if you're going to modify a car, figure out it, and you want to compete with it. If you want to compete with it, look at the damn rule book.
Right. Read it twice. And then ask somebody who knows about the rule book.
Yeah, maybe go to an event before you build a car for the event.
Right. Holy shit, that's the car that's in Street Mod?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do I build a street car?
How do I really? I want to go to Wendy's, dude. I just want to look like I'm cool. Hey, that's not a problem. We'll get you set up, bud.
Or Burger King. I think Burger King's more popular in the chat.
Yeah, in this chat, Burger King's where it's at. So we got you. All right, guys, we're gonna call it. This has been a fun one. Drew, I love having you on. We'll try to have you on again. This is always a good time. So
I appreciate it.
If you guys do need to contact Drew, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you? If they're looking for AN fittings, or maybe they're out in the Iowa area and need some support. You are an IAG dealer. What's your situation?
You can email me, sales@penguingarage.com. You can track me down on Instagram or Facebook @penguingarage. You can track me on my personal page on Facebook or Instagram. I'm the moron with the beard and sunglasses, so it's not hard to find.
And then penguingarage.com, right?
Yep, penguingarage.com. I also have a Facebook group called PGHQ, which is kind of our comings and goings of the shop itself. So people are welcome to join that group too. It's just kind of a place to ask random questions if you don't want to call me on a Saturday or something too. So
Drew's also a moderator on Track Subies. He's really big on the whole hashtag Subarus to the top also. So yep. All right, guys. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. And we will see you next time. Later.